Hey, football fanatics, welcome to the First and 10 Club with me, your host, Mark D. It's our Tuesday show where we recap the previous week's action on the gridiron. So, what happened in week 4? Well, week 4 was kind of a little bit crazy for a lot of non football reasons. Um, Turns out we didn't get the Tennessee Pittsburgh game, and we'll get to that. But looking at my picks from last week, we did pretty good, at least with the players we liked and didn't like. Players I liked, the Rams, Watson, Rodgers, Allen, all balled out. Darrell Henderson had a pretty good game. Kamara had a great game, as I expected. Frank Gore, shame on me for picking a Jet. Hollywood Brown, Will Fuller, Tyler Boyd, Hawkinson, Fant, and Kittle all did great. If you played them, there should be no disappointment with any of that. And teams that I faded or players that I faded, the Ravens defense wasn't horrible, but I did expect Washington to put up some points, and they did, although kind of in garbage time. And quarterbacks, well, Mahomes, not that he had a bad game, but I just didn't expect him to have a typical Patrick Mahomes game against the New England Patriots. And I was correct. Nick Foles, we'll get to that. Henry, Connor, like I said, I was fading them regardless if the game was played or not. That game obviously didn't play. Kenyon Drake, I told you guys, don't buy the hype. I know you can run against Carolina. Kenyon Drake, and I traded for him in one of my leagues because I was desperate. Just the running game in Arizona right now does not look right. Slayton, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill actually scored a touchdown, so it wasn't horrible for him. Hayden Hurts, Evan Ingram, all players just didn't really perform this week. So hopefully you listen to me on some of those. My bold predictions, yes and no. We're going to get to the whole Dallas, what I think is going on in Dallas. But the other thing, Chubb may have very well had his 150 yards and a touchdown, but unfortunately got hurt. But Cleveland running backs went off. So collectively, Watson should have had 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, but kind of came up short at the end of the game, which is a shame. And then the Thursday night game, yes, definitely more points scored there than 25, so I was wrong there. My picks this week, and I'm going to post this on my Twitter, I went 10-5 this week with my picks, which is normally pretty damn good. The funny part about it, though, the 4 games that I gave you, I went 1-3. And that was, I gave you the lock was the only one I got right. It was Baltimore over Washington, unfortunately. Carolina beats Arizona, Philadelphia beats San Francisco, and the Broncos beat the Jets. So, I'm going to do better, I promise. Or I'm just going to start giving you my other games. So, let's start to revisit week number 4. Tennessee versus Pittsburgh. So, yes, that game was postponed due to COVID. Tennessee, I believe now is up to 9 players who tested positive, which that's going to get tricky for them, and we'll talk about that then. But that's postponed or rescheduled to week number 7, and it worked out for them. They're going to move something around with Baltimore, and that game will get changed. But week number 7 will be the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game. I'm not going to harp too much on that. We'll cover that later as we get into the season. Let's talk about games. So let's start with that Thursday night game. Okay, so this week, the first head coach of the NFL 2020 season got fired. But it wasn't Gase. New York, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? Do you want to go 0-16? Is that the plan? The New York Jets look hapless. They don't look like an NFL team. If it wouldn't have been for some pretty unbelievable plays by a couple of cornerbacks, that game would have just been straight garbage for the Jets. This might have been your only chance to win a game. You played a team that came in decimated by injuries, and then throughout the game lost even more players. KJ Hamler went out with an injury almost immediately. Noah Fant left the game, I believe, in the late third, early fourth, with an ankle injury. You still couldn't get it done. You still couldn't win. I don't. I don't know what the expectation is. I don't know what the mindset is. But you talk about coaches and front offices losing a team. I'm not sure Adam Gase ever had his team. When you have players that are basically begging to be traded or left go, you already have that problem, and starting this way is not going to help. Brett Rippon, I talked about that. Nephew of Super Bowl MVP Mark Rippon. He had his good and bad. He put up a pretty significant stat line, but he did throw a couple of costly interceptions at bad times. And unfortunately, Brett, you're not going to get to face the Jets every week. So you are going to have to improve, but that's just a given with any player in the NFL. Wasn't horrible, and anytime you come out with a win in your first NFL game, you can't complain. So let's talk about the coach that did get fired, and we're going to move on to the Minnesota and Houston game. So the Minnesota Vikings get their first win, are now 1-3 over the winless Houston Texans. Watson had a chance at the end of this game, but he couldn't pull it off. And the running backs for Minnesota are just dominant. This team should be doing absolutely that. If it wouldn't be for Cook, and even when Cook, I think, just went out at one point in the game because he was gassed, Madison came in and didn't skip a beat. That's what's going to make Minnesota, competitive down the line here. These running backs are just thoroughbreds. But anyway, like I said, Watson had a chance to end the game, missed the throw of the end zone, game over, Houston's 0-4, and it cost your coach's job. Do I think Bill O'Brien should have been on the hot seat? Yes. Did I think that Bill O'Brien potentially was going to get fired? Yes, I did, especially if they didn't, have some pretty good results in 2020. Did I think Bill O'Brien should have been the first coach fired? No. This is a coach that took you to some division titles, has had winning records. The problem here, just Bill O'Brien, and my advice to you in your next part of your journey, your next stop in your career path, just coach. I don't think you're a horrible coach, but I think it's just way too much for you to be the coach and the GM. You have fleeced this franchise and really has set them back 10 years. The sad part about it is you are 0-4 right now, and you are doing nothing but helping another team. You're not even helping yourself. You can't even have a silver lining. Why? Your first round and second round pick for an 0-4 team at the end of the first quarter belong to the Miami Dolphins. You traded away DeAndre Hopkins. You still need to sign your quarterback. It's early in the season, and I hate to say it, but I think Houston could be on the verge of a drastic rebuild. And that's going to become an interesting thing to watch. So moving on to the team that's benefiting from Houston's demise, you have the Miami Dolphins. So they played the Seattle Seahawks this week, and as I predicted, although a little bit tighter than I expected, Seattle beat Miami. So right now, if the season ended, Miami, thanks to Houston, would have 2 top 10 picks. They have a very young nucleus. And although Miami didn't roll over and die, they didn't get the win. So you have to start to wonder when we're going to see Tua. Is it time for Tua yet in Miami? You got to start thinking that that's going to be here sooner than later. As for Seattle, Wilson is just being Wilson. And he continues what I think is an MVP season. He basically scores to his wide receivers at will, and he has a myriad of weapons to throw to. Carson continued to play. Really happy to see him back after the whole Tristan Hill situation the week before, so I'm glad he was able to go, and that didn't become an injury that would cost him time. But Seattle rolling 4-0, Miami 1-3, just 2 teams that look to be going in opposite directions. Moving on to Cincinnati and Jacksonville. So Burrow got his first win, which is great. He really has shown a lot of promise as a rookie and as the number one overall pick. And he got it on the back of his running back, Joe Mixon. I think this is an important thing for the coaches to note here. Joe Mixon is a very talented running back. And I really do believe that they need to get him involved and find ways to make him productive on this in this offensive scheme. And that might not mean running him between the tackles for play after play and hammering him through there. He got involved in this game. He got involved in some screen passes on some sweeps. They definitely seemed to vary his role in the offense throughout the game, and it paid huge dividends. So Burrow gets his first win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Jaguars seem to be going in the other direction. I didn't expect Jacksonville to be a very good team this year, and I think that's starting to normal out. Part of it is due to some injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The other side is Jacksonville really is the team that I expected them to be. I don't think Minshew is this miracle worker. And the question really is going to become is he the long-term answer there in Jacksonville? Cleveland and Dallas, going on to our next game, Cleveland and Dallas. So we went from a game that really wasn't super, super exciting to one that just couldn't stop scoring points. So the first thing I feel I really need to do here is I need to tip my hat to OBJ. Okay. I bag on OBJ on a regular basis. I still am not a huge fan of him, but he proved what I already know about OBJ. He's unbelievably talented. And man, when he comes to play or he wants to come and play, he is maybe the best wide receiver in the league and very, very difficult to stop. And that's great. They got it this week, and hopefully they get it for more. But one thing to note for Cleveland is they did lose Nick Chubb. It looks like it's going to be they're saying a 6-week injury. It's an MCL sprain. The good news is, well, they didn't lose much. They have Johnson. They went to Dearness Johnson, who didn't skip a beat, rushed for 100 yards. You have Kareem Hunt, who didn't get the lion's share of touches, but scored 2 touchdowns. So I don't expect to see the Cleveland running game really drop off. And here's the thing. Please don't turn this team into a passing team now just because you lost Chubb. You have the stable of running backs. Use them. Continue to be who you are, and I think Cleveland is going to be a contending team in 2020. Now let's go to Dallas. I said I was going to touch base on this later when we were going over my picks for last week. I'm starting to think that this season in Dallas is about Dak Prescott. And I'm starting to think that the coaching staff there isn't stopping it. It just doesn't seem like they're really involving Ezekiel Elliott the way I would expect them to. And it doesn't have to be Ezekiel Elliott. They can even mix Pollard in there. But it seems like they're just throwing the ball, throwing the ball. And it really, to me, seems like a lot of stat padding by Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is trying to get paid. He's trying to get paid as the highest quarterback in the league. He's made that very well known. I'm sorry, I think some very fair offers have been given to him, and he has snubbed his nose up to them. So he is looking to break the bank. He is looking for that crazy payday, and it looks like he is, at the cost of potentially wins, going after padding his stats. That's what I see from the outside, from a layman's point, from a fan's point. It just looks like this is the Dak Prescott show. Now, the scary part about this is Stephen Jones said that there wasn't any reason to sound the alarm. Your defense is the worst in the league. Your defense is giving up on average 38 points per game. There's no reason to sound the alarm. You just need to go to work. McCarthy says that there's no reason to change. They're going to stay the course. Well, okay, you're right. You're only 4 games in. There's definitely no reason to panic, especially in the NFC East. You're a half a game out. I don't even know if you're a half a game out because, God forbid, the team in your damn division tied, which is like kissing your sister. But, so yeah, maybe it's not time to panic yet. It might not be time to panic, but you sure as hell got to get something fixed. We'll see what they decide to do here, but right now, if you ask me to evaluate Dallas, Dallas has an ungodly potent offense and an unbelievably porous, horrible, turnstile defense. It's going to make for a lot of points to be scored. It's going to make for a lot of interesting and exciting games. I don't know how many wins it brings you. Moving on to teams who kind of turned out to be who I'm thinking they are. New Orleans over Detroit. So at the last minute, I changed my pick for this game. I was originally on New Orleans. I thought New Orleans was going to come back and bounce back. Well, they did. But in the last minute, I changed my pick to Detroit. And the reason I did was Detroit looked like this invigorated team beating the Cardinals last week. And on top of that, you got Kenny Galladay back. And New Orleans was down their top two cover corners. This should have been a smash spot for Matt Stafford, the wide receivers, the tight end. And I don't know really what happened. Yeah, they tried to come back late, but the fact of the matter is Drew Brees said he's not quite done yet. He proved that. He threw the ball around the field. Kamara had his game. And Detroit continues to be Detroit. They have these games that they win, and you kind of think, oh, okay, maybe Detroit's a little bit better than we think they are. And then you see them drop a stink bomb like this. This was a winnable game. This is a game they're going to wish I think they had back. And, top of the hat to New Orleans for, making sure that they got the win on this one. Talking about making sure you're getting wins, let's talk about Tampa Bay and the Los Angeles Chargers. So looking at this, going into this game, I would have bet 9 times out of 10, Tampa Bay wins this game easily. And the fact of the matter is the rookie went toe-to-toe with the GOAT. Justin Herbert was slinging that football all over the field. And if he hasn't done enough at this point to prove that he should be the quarterback of the Chargers moving forward, well then, Anthony Lynn, I don't know what to tell you. Because at this point, you should understand, and maybe it's because of injury and whatnot, putting this kid back on the bench, I don't think does him any good. It's a disservice to him. It's not that he doesn't belong in the NFL. He's making the throws. He is doing what he has to do. He put up a hell of a performance against a really good defense, in all honesty. Not an elite defense, but a really good defense. Let the kid learn. Let him get his bumps. But I don't see any reason why Herbert should revert back to the bench and why Taylor should ever be the starting quarterback of the Chargers again, bearing injury. So, yep, Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, well, they pulled it off at the end. So you had Mike Evans, who again, a little beat up, but comes back, scores 2 touchdowns this week. O.J. Howard with a beautiful, deep shot and a touchdown. Sadly, looks like they've lost him for the year with a ruptured Achilles, and that's a tough injury to come back from for a tight end. So, best wishes to you. Hopefully, you come back. The good news is they still have Cameron Brate there, and they still have Gronkowski, so they don't lose a whole lot there. Tampa Bay really definitely looks to be a team that's starting to come together, and that can be very dangerous. So you got to watch out for Tampa Bay at this point. So that's there. Let's go to Baltimore and the Washington football team next. Now, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Washington here, really not at all, because I have a special segment where we're going to cover them. All I'm going to say here, and it's a little teaser, that special segment is I was fairly impressed with Dwayne Haskins in this game. And everybody's making a big deal out of going for it on 4th down and the fact that he threw the ball as a check down. If you look at the play, I don't see any place where he's throwing it that he's not throwing an interception. So everyone's like, oh, but they want to see him throwing in the end. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself. If you're really interested and you want to see a really harsh take on kind of the state of things, watch the special that I'm going to do this week in regards to the Washington football team. But let's go back to Baltimore here. Baltimore won this game, and handily. This game was in Baltimore's control for the majority of it. And Lamar Jackson had a phenomenal game. Wonderful game. Busted out his career-long rushing touchdown. Yeah, I expected all this. But I'm sorry, you still haven't proven anything. This game didn't fix what everyone was talking about after the Kansas City game. Everyone said, oh, well, that's just showing how good Kansas City is. No, yes, that's part of it. But the other part of it, too, is we still haven't seen that Lamar Jackson can come back and win. That Lamar Jackson, when trailing, can rally a team and put together game-winning drives to come back and overtake a deficit. That's what I'm waiting to see from Lamar Jackson. Again, phenomenal athlete. Yes, he's going to put up stats. Yes, he's going to do amazing things with his arms, with his legs. And yeah, he made some amazing throws in that game. But this was a game they should have won. And they did. Expected them to win this game. You'll have some tough competition coming up. Those are the games that I really want to pay attention to. I want to see if, when adversity hits, when they're down 17 points, when they're down 21 points, can they come back and win? The funny thing about it is, Dwayne Haskins, he's done that. Lamar Jackson hasn't. Now, I'm not going to say that Haskins is a better quarterback than Jackson at this point. But if you want to look at weird stats to compare quarterbacks to, Lamar Jackson, you got to get that monkey off your back. Moving on to monkeys on backs, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals and the giant boulder or gorilla that has now clung to their back. They've now dropped 2 straight games. Is there cause of concern for Arizona? I don't know. There's no running game, which baffles me. Carolina can't stop anyone on the run. Yet, Cardinals couldn't run this week. So does that go to coaching and Cliff Kingsbury? Is he just one of these coaches that he's going to do his thing and not take what's given to him? I don't know. It's not serving you well. Carolina came out and put together a pretty decisive win. This wasn't even a situation, in my opinion, where it was close and back and forth. Carolina controlled this game. So that's no reason to get concerned yet, but you probably play in the toughest division in the league, so you better get things right quick before you fall out of it really fast. As for Carolina, hats off to Matt Rule. You lose your best player in Christian McCaffrey, and you go and win 2 games. You have Robbie Anderson looking like a elite wide receiver and definitely a true number 1. DJ Moore really hasn't done anything this year, so you have weapons that you're not even tapping into yet. So interested to see how that plays out throughout the season and how the team grows under him. Carolina might be a little bit of a sleeper, a little bit of a contender to make some noise this year. Now, moving on to our next game, definitely a team that I don't expect to make any noise this year. We're going to talk about the Los Angeles Rams versus the New York Giants. A game that the Rams surprisingly won, but it was much closer than I expected it to be. And really the most exciting thing in this game, besides Daniel Jones, in my opinion, looking like garbage, was the Ramsey versus Golden Tate. Now, I'm going to talk about Ramsey versus Tate, the grudge match, later. But I just want to say, and I get that maybe he's a little butthurt over it, the tackle that Ramsey put on Tate might be one of the best tackles I have ever seen in the game of football. And I'm not talking about the, back in the day when you could actually hit people. I'm talking an actual clean NFL tackle where he just came out and took him to the whooping shit. So when we get to run out the clock, we're going to talk about the no love lost between these two guys. But that was a fun thing to watch. Moving on to things that weren't necessarily super fun to watch and was actually a fairly boring game. But we have the Indianapolis Colts over the Chicago Bears. I don't know where I want to start here. Well, let's start with Indianapolis. So I said this would be a Super Bowl team. And I said if they were a Super Bowl team, it would be on 2 things. It'd be on an extremely strong running game and an elite defense. Well, I've got half of it right. They have an elite defense. They are ranked number 1 across the board in defensive statistics. Yeah, maybe that's part of matchups that they faced, but Indianapolis has looked formidable, daunting, and definitely a defense I would not want to come across in a dark alley. And that's why Indy has been so successful. Unfortunately, they lost in week 1. which everyone who's in a survivor pool probably cost 50% of you at least your season. Quick early exit. But I do like what Indy has, and I think they're going to continue to grow. Remember, you had no real official preseason here. I think Rivers is going to continue to get continuity within the offense, and hopefully Taylor starts to become a little more comfortable. And if the defense can hold things together while the offense gels, I do think they become a very difficult out in the rest of the season. Now to Chicago. Are you happy? Chicago, are you happy? Nagy, are you happy? Because your quarterback looked really dull. Didn't seem to have too much of a spark. Yeah, he threw a garbage time touchdown to Allen Robinson, which thank you very much. I needed that in my fantasy leagues. But is this really the end result that you wanted? I told you this was going to happen. I said it called it the Foles experiment. Well, now you better hope that he bounces back. You better hope that he starts getting you wins. Because his record as a starting NFL quarterback is 0-1. The guy you benched, well, he didn't lose a game. There's all kinds of talk right now in Chicago and in the Twitterverse that maybe they're looking to trade Trubisky. They wanted Trubisky's value to get high, and now they're saving him because they elevated a practice squad quarterback. Okay. Quarterbacks very rarely get traded mid-season. It's just very difficult. Of all the positions on a football field to come in and get acclimated to, quarterback may be one of the hardest. And really, I'll be honest, the only way I see Trubisky getting traded during the season is if you have a contending team go down, have their starting quarterback go down with an injury that doesn't have a viable backup. Maybe in that case, then they look to acquire a Mitchell Trubisky. Other than that, I don't expect to see him get traded, especially in a year of COVID, where look at what's happening in New England right now. So, with that being said, Chicago, I don't know. I don't know what your next step is. Hopefully, Foles bounces back. If not, now you have a quarterback controversy. Now, what do? You go back to Trubisky? This is all on you, Nagy. All on you. You made this happen. Buffalo over the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, I've said this enough. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Buffalo's going to be a tough out this season. Allen is playing phenomenal. Offense is clicking. Defense is clicking. That's all that needs to be said. Buffalo is 4-0. First time in over a decade. That division should be theirs. And it's all good in Buffalo. The Bills Mafia should be quite happy right now, much to the chagrin of tables being crashed into everywhere. Which, by the way, Bills Mafia, if somebody can show me the proper technique to crash through a table with COVID precautions, I'd be very curious to see that. But let's go to the other side of the game. So the Las Vegas Raiders is getting better, but I still think they're missing weapons. But the thing that I found interesting here, which I don't think this does anything good for your team, was Carr comes out after this game. You're 2-2. The two games that you've lost, it hasn't been like you've been blown out. It's competitive. You're not going to win every week in the NFL. Comes out and throws basically a temper tantrum, saying he's been there long enough and he's tired of losing. And throughout his statement, yeah, he does say the team, but honestly, reading this, I took this as really he's throwing his team under the bus. At one point, he says, "There's only so much I can do." Carr, tread lightly. It's not like you are the all-pro franchise quarterback for this team. They brought in Marcus Mariota this year, and it wasn't just to give you a good backup. It's because they weren't sure that you were the answer. So I don't know that I'd be going out throwing stones on a glass house. Yeah, you've had a great start to the year. And yeah, you haven't thrown any interceptions yet. But you had some fumbles, some costly fumbles at the end of games. It's a team. Quarterback definitely should not be going out and having these types of statements, in my opinion. I think this just puts a giant wedge in a team. And Gruden, good luck. Get this ship back in order, because if not, it can sink quick, especially for you, Mr. Carr. Now we go to the Sunday night game. I should have known better. When I looked to pick this game, when I was reviewing this game, Philadelphia versus San Francisco, I knew in the subcockles, deep down in the subcockles, this wasn't going to be a good game for the 49ers. See, being from the NFC East and being a foe or an opposing fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, you just know that they're like a fungus. You think you have it licked, you think it's gone, and then it comes back and gets you. And that's the Philadelphia Eagles. I say that with love, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. I don't like Philly, but I just knew that Philly was going to win this game. Pardon me. The odds were so against them. And that's when Philly really comes out and pulls out these amazing upset victories. Your best wide receiver going into this game was Greg Ward. You lost another offensive lineman. In the first, I think, 5 minutes of the game, Lane Johnson limps off the field. And yet, somehow, miraculously, you allow them to stay in the game. You allow them to stay in the game. You allow them to stay in the game. Until Carson Wentz pulls them ahead. And then further ahead, thanks to a pick six. 14 points on 2 plays. Got to love that. And then after that, it just wasn't enough. They benched Nick Mullins. Beathard comes in, and he did his best to try and rally them, but it wasn't enough. The only bright spot for San Francisco really in this game, I think their defensive line was garbage. There's no reason they should have been in Carson Wentz's lap all day. I don't think there was enough pressure brought. And like I said, the only good thing from this game was, one, a hell of a hurdle by Brandon Ayuk, and then just absolute, complete, utter dominance by Kittle. Philadelphia still cannot cover a tight end. Cincinnati really should have thought of that last week. Maybe they'd be 1-3 right now. But George Kittle, man, career game. So Philly beats San Francisco, and because of that tie, have leapfrogged to first in the division, the worst division in football. So can't wait to see what Week 5 brings. Now on to our 2 Monday night games. So, for starters, we had 2 Monday night games because of COVID. And I'm already irritated with COVID in the NFL. And we're going to talk about that in running out the clock. But Kansas City over New England. Yep, Chiefs win. That would have been a dramatic, ridiculous upset. I don't care if Bill Belichick's your coach. I don't care if it was John Madden who was your coach. Doesn't matter. New England doesn't have their quarterback. You're up against the Chiefs on an away game. The fact of the matter is, you can't stop Mahomes. You can only hope to contain him. And I think the Patriots did for the most part. They just don't have enough offense in order to really contend with a team like that. Everyone that said, oh, it's New England's still going to win the division. New England's, maybe with Cam Newton, it's a little bit of a different team, but short of one fabulous run by Harris, the offense was really non-existent for the Patriots this week. So hopefully, Cam, I hope you recover from COVID soon, because your team desperately needs you. And then moving on to Green Bay over Atlanta. So, we already talked about Gase having a hot seat. Dan Quinn, I don't even know if I'd sit down. That's how hot the seat is. No Lazard, no Adam, no problem. It didn't matter. Aaron Rodgers is playing just out of this universe. He is going to prove a point this year. And I didn't say this in my predictions, but I don't see any way. They're just 2 teams that I believe are way ahead of the competition right now. The NFC Championship game will be Seattle versus Green Bay. I don't see anyone else posing a threat to them. I really don't. I mean, there's some good teams in the NFC, but not like these two teams. And it's not even like there's not. I mean, Green Bay's faced injuries, and they're not even skipping a beat. Hanyan, the tight end that no one talked about, 3 touchdowns last night. If you had a pulse, Aaron Rodgers could hit you for a touchdown. So, like I said, the QB's on a mission. Atlanta, I don't know. I don't. The most underachieving team in the NFL. There's just too much talent on this team for them to be playing this poorly. And Dan Quinn, it would not surprise me if you are not let go within the next week or two, especially if you can't get a win. So that's our recap of the games. Time to run out the clock. Tristan Hill. Well, the NFL finally fined you $13,000. Woo. Sorry, NFL. I think that's weak. And I've watched the video. I've gone back and I mean, to me, that's just it's blatant. There's just I cannot wrap my head around how he didn't mean to do that. How he was just that's blatant to me. $13K, okay, you fined him. I'll give you that. Maybe that's because Chris Carson didn't miss any time. That's why that happened to be that fine. I don't think that's how you should be doing things. But we all know that Roger Goodell in the NFL has no set standards on how they punish anyone. It's just at their whim. Moving forward to the Thug of the Week or the new Thug of the Week, maybe this becomes a segment for us. Man, Greg Williams back to his old tricks again. Just a lot of dirty, cheap shots in the Jets-Broncos game. Look, Greg, your team sucks. Okay, so the fact that the product that you're putting out on the field is lesser than pretty much anyone you're going to face this year, and don't be sore sports about it. There's no reason to be going after quarterbacks. I mean, I think they had 3 flags in the last 5 minutes for unnecessary roughness. Frustrations are just overwhelming there. And we all know that Greg Williams has a history of encouraging things like that. So I don't know if he's our Thug of the Week or it should be Ramsey versus Tate. So not only did Ramsey poster size Golden Tate with just a absolute spear body slam legal tackle. But then at the end of the game, there's a massive brawl between the two teams, and it's being said that Ramsey threw the first punch. So it's going to be curious to see if there's fines or suspensions levied because of this. But then on top of it, there's reports that Ramsey goes and waits outside the New York Giants dressing room after the game. Now, if you don't know the backstory to this, Jalen Ramsey is actually the father of Golden Tate's 2 nieces. I think they're nieces, both nieces, but and basically he dumped Golden Tate's sister. So this isn't a football thing. This is bad blood in the real world. I only wish that these two were in the same division because that might have been one of the most entertaining things I saw on Sunday. It's a shame that they just re-signed him in LA because, man, I would have loved to see him come to Washington or even Philly or Dallas just to see these guys go at it twice a year, every year. So, tops for that. The big issue this week in the NFL was COVID and the NFL. And look, there's a couple of things that I was left scratching my head. For starters, okay, so Tennessee, Pittsburgh gets postponed because Tennessee has an outbreak. That's fine. They were talking last week that this could leak into week 5, that potentially the game between Tennessee and Buffalo would have to be postponed or rescheduled. Well, how's that going to work? Now, the good news is Tennessee has had no positive tests for 2 days in a row. If it's 3 days in a row, they're allowed to go back and practice. And it does look like everything will be back to normal, minus Tennessee is going to be short quite a few players. But this is going to happen in the NFL. Then you had the whole Kansas City New England situation. So now you have Kansas City, New England, where Cam tests positive, and the practice squad, Temu, I think his name is, for Kansas City, the practice squad quarterback tests positive for Kansas City, and everything's put on pause. They wait, they want to test, they want to look, so forth and so on. They end up being able to play on Monday night. But now my question is, last week, AJ Terrell, the corner of the Atlanta Falcons, tested positive, and they just put him on the COVID list. There was no talk about the game being postponed. There was no. So maybe I'm being facetious, and maybe I'm just overthinking it. But my question is, okay, well, why the super strict caution and protocol for the New England Kansas City game? Is it possible because Patrick Mahomes was playing in that game? The NFL doesn't want their golden goose to have to miss potential 2 to 3 or 4 weeks because of COVID. I just find it funny how it seems that the rules keep changing. And I understand it's a living, breathing kind of organism, no pun intended. And things are going to you're going to need to go with the flow. But I want to know what the NFL's plan is. They really haven't come out and established any type of course of action that we know as fans. It's, again, another one of those things under Roger Goodell where it's trust us, we have it in hand. Well, what happens? Okay, this worked out. Pittsburgh, Tennessee, that worked out. They moved some things around. But now what happens if the Tennessee-Buffalo game would have had been postponed or canceled? You can't just keep shifting the schedule. You can't keep moving the schedule around or whatnot. And if you are going to do that, if it's going to extend the season out and maybe there'd be a week 18 and there'd be different buys, well, now you talk about competitive balance. I think the easier thing to be done this year was there should have been bye weeks. I really don't think so. Or you should have built in an extra week. You should have had a break in the middle of the season where everybody got a bye week in week 8. And then you had weeks at the end of it that were set up that if you did it that way, if everybody had the same bye across the board, you could have done scheduling that would have allowed that in these situations you can replay games during that bye week or at the end of the season. Now you open yourself up to the situation of, well, what happens now if Baltimore's already moved, so they're losing their bye week, that's changing and whatnot, but what happens now if one of these teams play, or you have other teams that you have to postpone games? You've opened a Pandora's box. So the only way that we really see how this plays out is we have to go through the season, but my fingers are crossed, and I'm really hoping that this stays strong, and, it starts to dissipate and people pay attention to protocols, which we all know, Raiders and some other teams that are not following the protocol. Please take this seriously from a fan's perspective, from a nation perspective, from a societal perspective. We want and need football. I really hate to see the season get canceled halfway through. And then in my final kneel down today, I want to talk about Crucial Catch, the initiative that the NFL does every year to honor breast cancer survivors and just cancer survivors all around. This past week and the Washington football team's home game, they revealed the Rivera Strong Corner with people from all walks of life, family members, coaches, other players, celebrities that purchased cardboard cutouts in support of Ron Rivera, and that's phenomenal and that's great. And I don't want to take anything from that. I'm Rivera Strong also, obviously, Coach. We wish you nothing but the best. But what I do want to bring kind of to light, or my thoughts as I sat and thought about this, my mom is a cancer survivor. I've had multiple friends who have beaten it, family members, and I know people who have lost their lives to cancer. I'm a big proponent and supporter of American Cancer Society and Relay for Life. You make this big deal out of Coach Rivera, and not that it's not deserving, but there's a whole corner of people, and I just want it to be known, and I think it should be noted. Here's somebody who already has a ton of national recognition and has a support system around, and there's so many people that battle cancer by themselves. There's so many people that don't get cardboard cutouts on a national stage on Sunday, and love and support from movie stars and coaches, and it just seems a little unfair and a little unbalanced because sometimes those are the people who end up giving up because they don't feel like they have anyone. They don't feel like they have anybody in their corner to fight that horrible, deadly disease. And it's a shame. It really is. And I want people to know, for anybody who does watch my show, that if you have either faced cancer on your own, or a family member or friend who's battled cancer, you're not alone. Um, there's so many people out there. There's so many great organizations. Please make sure you look out to them. Okay, you might not get cardboard cutouts in an NFL stadium, but there's so many people that would be there in your corner. I do know a friend of mine who battled cancer and luckily beat it, but pretty much did it the whole time on his own. And it's just such a sad thing. And the reason he did it on his own is because he just kept it to himself. He really didn't tell anyone until afterwards. So, to Coach Rivera, obviously, hope that you survive through this whole process. I know it's unbelievably taxing on you. The fact that you still are going out there and coaching is, so commendable. But stay strong. If you need a break, take the break. We all understand. And for everybody out there who's battling cancer, or know somebody who is, you're not alone. There's lots of people in your corner. So that's my 2 cents heading into the NFL's Crucial Catch month, in the month of October here. So with that, it's our show for this Tuesday. Tomorrow, for the Washington football team fans or anybody else who just wants to see a very passionate segment, we are going to do a first quarter review of the Washington football team, because that is my team. And then, of course, Thursday we'll have our picks, predictions, and bold takes. So don't mix that. If you like what you're seeing, please share, tell your friends. Couple of thoughts heading into waiver wires. If Tanyan is not picked up, the tight end for the Green Bay Packers, or Dearness Johnson, the running back for the Cleveland Browns, get your waiver claims in for them. Click subscribe down below, set up alerts. Don't miss our show. I'm Mark D for the First and 10 Club. Let's go football.